My name is Kerri Meyer, and I'm the founder of Sync Learning. How many of you guys are currently leading either a team or maybe working with virtual teams? Yeah, okay, so we've got quite a few. And so what we're going to talk about today is just overcoming some of those barriers that naturally exist when you've gone from in-person to a virtual setting. We're going to focus in on 3 specific ones, but I suspect that throughout our time together, we'll come up with some other ones that we'll want to explore as well. I have put in the chat box a link. If you are someone who would like to download a kind of workbook to go along with what we're talking about, there's a couple of key points in there. So feel free to do that now. You're welcome to print it or just look at it on a different monitor. So today what we're going to talk about is identifying strategies for overcoming limiting beliefs about the way work should be. We're also going to look at some of those negative assumptions that we make about employees when they're not in our visual space, as well as creating results-focused environment versus looking at just what people are doing all the time. So we're going to really focus on looking at those results and the outcomes of what their work is. Finally, we'll talk about fostering a community in a remote environment and what are some of the best practices for doing that. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to engage today. We'll use the screen share, a little bit of the whiteboard. We're also going to use the chat feature. If you aren't comfortable with the chat feature, that's okay. You can come off of mute and just discuss things verbally, but do remember to come off of mute, do better than I just did. And then I'll encourage you also to do some self-reflection and notes. Excuse me. These are going to be some of our icons for the tools that we'll be using. So when you see that little 3-lined thing, that represents chat. We'll also be using the check mark, and you can find these by, let's see, it depends on your screen. So I am using my participant screen over here on my other computer. And when I try to find this little icon bar, it's up on the upper right-hand side for me. Now, depending on your computer setup, it might look a little different. Can everyone locate their toolbar? All right, I'm seeing some heads nod. So we'll also use the raise hand feature in Zoom, and we'll use the voice, just come off of mute, as well as texting or typing text on our screens. All right, so our first activity in the chat feature, go ahead and let us know why you're interested in becoming a better virtual leader. What is it about this topic that drew you to today's discussion? If you prefer not to text, feel free to come off of mute. We'll accept it that way as well. So what is it about becoming a virtual leader? Why are you interested in that? Virtual isn't going away, and we all need to learn how to do it better. Amen to that. That's absolutely right. Someone mentioned in our networking time that, who would have guessed last March that we would be here almost a full year later doing the same sort of thing. Improving skills of using Zoom. Great. Well, hopefully you'll get some tips and tricks with what we're going to do today. I'm happy to follow up with you later too, if there's any questions there. To keep our constituents healthy, we're currently operating in the virtual space. Would love to ensure we operate effectively in this space. Absolutely. Some of the things that we'll talk about today also can be used when you transition back into the office someday, if that's going to be the case for you. And then better outcomes, self-limiting beliefs. Yeah, I'm anxious to talk about those. Sometimes it's kind of fun to think about or discuss what we have inside our heads, our teammates. Learning a new skill to keep up with the current changes, certainly always room for improvement, and inspire activation in others. Great. Well, those are great reasons to learn more. Let's get started. So I want to just ground us in some vernacular here. what do we mean when we're talking about remote workers? And what the definition that we're going to use today that we're going to work with is anyone who works from home, whether that's on occasion or full time. It could be anything in between there, even a flexible work from home arrangement. It also includes someone who might be working on the road. Maybe they're traveling, they may not be traveling in an airplane right now, but maybe they're still driving to other locations. And finally, it includes people who are geographically dispersed. So for example, I may be on a team here in Reno, but I have team members all over the globe. And so which definitions apply to you? Just go ahead and come off of mute. Anyone here working globally or teams that are geographically dispersed?
I'm working in 2 different towns.
Ah, okay. Within Reno? Or I'm sorry, within Nevada?
Sonoma, California, and Reno, Nevada, yeah.
Okay. So still the same time zone, but still needing to work virtually. Makes sense. Anyone crossing time zones right now?
I'm working across time zones. I kind of set up a mentor program. So I have people who are in St. Paul, Minnesota, as well as San Diego, as well as here in Carson. And I think we have someone else who's somewhere else back east as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the time zone thing definitely applies for you. And if I miss any chats, I'm trying to keep up with all of it. I should have brought a producer with me today. I didn't think of doing that, but feel free to call him out. I'm happy to pivot to chats as well. All right, across the US from Kim, great. So we're going to discuss 3 barriers. The first is staying focused and motivated when working virtually and leading virtually. The second is discussing and overcoming that sense of isolation that is all too prevalent for our teammates. And then the third is the feeling of stagnation. How do we properly lead, coach, and develop people when we're not sharing the same location? So first, I'm going to come out of presentation mode, and I'm just going to ask you guys, let's brainstorm a little bit. Can everyone see that okay? Okay. So what might it sound like if people are demotivated? So they're working from home or working remotely, and they're demotivated. So this is sort of the negative approach. And what would it sound like if they were positive or motivated? So I gave one example. For example, I might be thinking, is everyone working as hard as I am? Because I feel like I'm working all day long and there's just a blur between my home life and my professional life. Whereas if I'm positive about my current situation, I might be thinking, I love how productive I am when I'm working from home. I get so much more done. So just go ahead and come off of mute, and I'm going to type these into our chat so we have this for posterity's sake. What might it sound like if you're demotivated?
This might be too similar, but I find myself saying, I live at work. So it's kind of similar to what you have up there, but I do now feel that I'm living in my workspace. I'm not working in my home space, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. Completely resonates with me. I'm living in my workspace, not working in my living space. Love it. And what would that sound like if it was positive? What do you guys think?
There's no commute.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe I have set up appropriate physical and emotional boundaries, right? So I'm still working here and I'm still living here, but it's very clear the definitions, So for example, my family knows I'm doing this right now. Normally I would put up, I have a little sign over here that says presenting or in a meeting, unless you're bleeding and have to go to the emergency room, in which case there are Ubers. You still don't have to interrupt me. Because I can't join you anyway at the hospital, right? But finding ways to set those boundaries is important.
Right.
Anything else?
How about a person saying, well, I can get to it tomorrow, it'll wait for me.
Yeah, I can get to it tomorrow. It can wait. Whereas maybe the positive, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, since I have less time for travel, I got more time to get work done. I'll go ahead and knock it out.
Yeah. Perfect. All right, you've got the hang of it. Let's try two more. So this one is isolation. So if I'm feeling isolated and I'm working from home, I might be saying it's really hard to focus. You know, I've got all this stuff going on. I need to go throw a load of laundry in, my kids are screaming, whatever. Whereas positive, I love being able to really focus on my work. What are your thoughts in terms of isolation that might be a reality for working remotely?
Hard to communicate with my team and my coworkers.
Yeah. Because I'm not right there, right? I can't just pop by someone's desk.
Right.
What might a positive be?
Learning new ways
Yeah.
to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah, new tools, new apps, oops, new tools. It's always a risk when you're typing live on screen.
Could have been worse.
Anything else that you can think of with isolation? Oh, I have one. Am I the only one really working? Like, is everyone pulling their weight? And the positive of that, I don't know, what do you think? How great that we get to work in our own.
See who pulls weight.
What's that?
You can see who pulls the weight when they're all remote.
Or there's nobody looking over our shoulders.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because by nature, when you remove proximity, you're already a little more focused on results. Well, hopefully, unless they're constantly texting you or pinging you or otherwise looking at you. All right. And how about if I feel stagnated or, you know, I just don't have any growth? I've got an example of how can I get visibility for my career or just for myself versus, you know, hey, I'm developing a really great network. I'm, you know, on Slack or I'm pinging people through instant message. You don't have to have a negative. If you have a positive, that works too. Thoughts? This one's a little more hard or a little more challenging.
I don't know if I'm thinking of this in the right way, but a positive is I've sort of been forced to use LinkedIn and other business networking tools more because I can't just walk into a business like I'm used to. So using those online business networking social media tools has been a positive.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
So I guess the negative to that would be I'll just wait until we're back in person to work with that business.
Yeah.
To talk with that company or something.
Absolutely. And, you know, if you think about your competition, they're not sitting waiting for things to return to normal, right? They're finding new ways to engage, new ways to interact, new ways to connect, and to make that networking occur. Love it. All right, let's go back to our presentation. That's one thing about Zoom is a little frustrating is that you have to keep swapping views. So if anyone has a fix to that, let me know, because I have not figured it out yet. Let's talk about challenges for remote leaders. So I'm sure this is only a very small portion of what you guys have dealt with in terms of challenges, but the three that I chose to focus on here were ensuring performance standards are met, keeping direct reports and yourself focused and engaged, and coaching and developing people virtually. Because when you think about the whole host of what it means to be a leader, this obviously isn't all encompassing, but it hits in 3 key areas. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about is those limiting beliefs. So before I forward this slide, what are some of the limiting beliefs that you've caught either yourself saying, either out loud or just to yourself, or have heard other people say in terms of people working remotely?
They don't work the full amount. They're not getting their work done. They're putting it off.
If I can't see it being done, they're not doing the full amount. Maybe they're only working 3 hours, right? What else? How about they're probably spending more time on home stuff versus real work? And then what I have heard in my coaching practice is, it's way too hard to coach people virtually. I can't do it because I can't see their body language, or I don't know what to say. I hate video. I don't want to get on video. Those types of limiting beliefs. Any others that come to mind for you? All right. Well, let's take a look at what we can do with that. Oops, sorry about that. We're going to focus on 3 critical areas to overcome those limiting beliefs. I'm just checking the chat here. Teams around the world. Oh, okay. Sorry, that came in a little bit later, and I apologize for not checking that. Someone has teams around the world with multiple time zones. So definitely someone who is challenged in probably many of these areas. So I'm curious, when we get to best practices, if you have some to share with us. All right, we're going to talk about being attentive, fostering community, and coaching and develop. And my hope here is that it's not just all of the things that I've put on a slide, but also that we can learn from one another in this community. I think that's where the real meat and potatoes comes from. So what I'd love for you to do is find your toolbar and just type on the screen, what does it mean to you to be attentive? Dave, you might have to make sure that everybody has the ability to annotate. Is everyone able to type on screen? To be timely. Yeah. Certainly one of the factors of being attentive is to be timely. If, someone has a request on your team, to answer them in an appropriate amount of time. And I think that gets magnified when you're in a virtual setting. Because it feels like, if someone hasn't answered your instant message or your Slack message in 10 minutes, it feels like it's been a day. And so I think sometimes that gets just even more blown out of proportion. The ability to repeat what was said, right? Kind of echo back and ensure that that understanding has occurred. What else? If it's too tough to type, feel free to come off of mute and just share it with us verbally.
Have a to-do list.
Tell me more.
I think it's important to, have goals that are attainable on a daily basis, and that kind of keeps you engaged in progressing things.
Okay. Yeah. Making sure that you're able to kind of make forward progress. And with respect to team members or people that report to you, how would you use a to-do list to foster attentiveness?
Well, I think that's really easy, actually, because, especially if you're in a leadership role, there's tasks that need to get done, and you dole those out to your team. And again, make them achievable goals that can be met, that you can reach out, touch, and it's just a way of fostering communication with them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right about that. We, making sure that they have that clear understanding of what can be accomplished, whether that's in a list form or an objective form. And then the trick is not being micromanaging, right, to that list. But I know no one here would be that way. Great. I'm gonna go ahead and clear that so we don't take that with us into the next portion. Dave, I'm not sure what happened, but there's no ability. It's not allowing me to forward. Oh, there we go. Okay. Some ideas I came up with: be present, pay attention to individual differences, make sure you're requesting feedback for your own interaction virtually, and lead with purpose. And I've got some ideas around that here in just a moment. Okay, so go ahead and raise your hand. It's time to get honest. How many of you multitask while on conference calls, or perhaps are multitasking right now as we speak? It's okay. We've all done it. But what happens when we're not present? What's the impact of that? Go ahead and just come off of mute.
Easily distracted.
Absolutely.
You miss stuff.
For sure.
You're not engaged.
Yep, not engaged. And that lack of engagement can actually cause distrust to happen in a group or on a team, right? Yeah, that people disconnection goes down overall. Some of the ways that we can limit that is by using video, making sure that you're giving people feedback and opinions and things like that. And I think no, I didn't put that in the participant guide, but we can discuss more when we get to best practices. All right, so what I want to do here is I am going to call out each of the things that are the options that are on the screen. And I'm going to ask you to raise your hand which one applies to you. So for example, communicating. How many of you prefer to talk on the phone versus send emails? So how many, just raise your hand, how many of you like to talk on the phone? Okay. And how many people, I'm seeing heads shake, no. How many people prefer to send emails? All right, so we're seeing a difference there. In terms of energy, how many of you have the most amount of energy during the morning? Okay, handful. How many in the midday? Less, a couple. How about afternoon? Okay, so some. And then scheduling. How many are in the call me whenever, it's okay, I'm always on and available camp? Okay, and then how about plan ahead and calendar it? I'm happy to talk to you, but make an appointment first. Got a few. I learn best by reading, talking it out, or trying it. Excellent. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see them on the screen. And my point here is that tailoring our approach to individual differences with our team members is really important, because if I am Energizer Bunny in the morning and I'm throwing at my team a bunch of tasks, and most of my team has the most energy in the later day or prefers to do their work late at night, it's all lost on them. And what's going to happen is they're going to miss cues that I've given them. They might miss instructions and details. And so it's important to understand how people prefer to communicate, when their highest energy levels are. How do they like scheduling and interacting with you? Do they have neat buckets for their life and or their work life and their personal life? Or is it more of an integration? You know, it ebbs and flows. I run up, I do a thing of laundry, I come back down, and now I have a lot of energy to focus. Knowing those things about the people you work with is going to put you in a better position to be able to get better outcomes. What are your thoughts? Agree, disagree? Don't care?
I agree with that. That's really hard to manage, because that means I need to be all these things.
Well, just knowing. I'm not suggesting you have to be all of the things. I'm just saying know them. So for example, one easy way I've done it in the past is I've created an Excel spreadsheet, and I had a tab for communication. I had a tab for energy. I forget what the other tabs were. And then if I had like a big project and I needed to pull a bunch of people together, I would make sure that I was honoring their preferences and in as much so as I could, right? Obviously, it's not a perfect world and we can't flex all the time to everyone, but it helps to know those so that you can get the best out of your people, right? I would say the payoff is worth it.
Okay.
But it is a lot of work.
And
virtually, it's more work than in person.
And did you ask them these same questions?
I did. Yeah.
You say that. It's like an easy way to do it.
Yeah, it's super simple. I mean, it's just a chart, right? A little, yeah, you can do it in Excel or put it into a table in Word or whatever you'd like, but it's real simple. What I found is a lot of people said, you're the first leader that's ever asked me that, which I found illustrating, because what that tells me is they've been forced into working a certain way most of their life. And when I took some of those holds off, I found that their output was way better than it ever was before. For example, a standard way that I word it is, I don't care when you do the work. I mean, I need you to show up at meetings when you've said you're going to show up at meetings. But other than that, I don't care when you do the work, and I don't care where you do it from. I care about the results, and I'm going to hold you accountable to the results and the outcome. How you get it done, as long as you're not leaving dead bodies behind you, fantastic. More power to you if you can do it from a beach in Rio. I don't care. I just need the outcome to be really spectacular. Okay. And people typically show up doing their best work then. All right, feedback. A couple of ideas for feedback is, after conference calls or meetings, I would encourage you to check in with your team and ask them, you know, hey, how did that go? What did you think? Anything I could do to improve? Maybe set a goal for quarterly to ask them, what do I do that makes your job easier? What do I do that makes it more challenging? You know, where are my blind spots? What do I not know that I should know? Asking those questions, whether you're a people leader or not, really opens up, it's a little bit of a Pandora's box, but at least you know now what you need to perhaps focus on. A couple of other ideas, just call people and check in on them from time to time. And one thing that I will say is that when you're leading virtually, you do need to hold meetings, one-on-one meetings, more frequently, but you don't want to do it the same amount of length. So it should be more frequent, but in shorter bursts. And make sure that you're allowing them to come with an agenda, not just yourself. So if you were meeting every other week, maybe meet every week now, but make it 30 minutes instead of an hour. All right. The other thing is frequently use video. We're on video right now today, and that's great, but I can't tell you the number of people that say, I hate video. It requires me to look, you know, great. I don't like how it's up close and personal. And yes, those are all things that are true, but I would encourage you to use it when and where possible, because it doesn't replace being in person, but at least you can see some of my mannerisms and you can hear the tonality of my voice and see it matching my face, right? So if that's been a challenge for you, I would just encourage you to find ways to let loose of that perfection. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to look amazing every time you're on video.
If you're holding a meeting and you're the one who called the meeting, you're the supervisor,
yes,
you require them to be on video. Because again, isn't that a way to see if they're being attentive and all that kind of stuff, and the eye contact, et cetera, what you were talking about?
Yeah. Before I answer, I'd like to get other people's responses to that. What do you guys think? Only if their tech works. That's a good point. We have a lot of challenges right now with weather all over the world, really, not just the country. There's challenges with bandwidth. What else do you guys think? Would you require it?
Something that may be beneficial is offering the reverse effect. So saying to someone maybe who has a lot of Zoom meetings, via video throughout the week, offering the opportunity in some meetings and saying, as a mental health day, feel free to mute your camera. Maybe kind of setting that precedence of mute your camera if you're exhausted or you've been on video. I don't know if that's a good strategy.
I love that. That's a great idea. Yeah, offer kind of an opt-out from time to time, and maybe give them some reasons why they might want to. Some people always like to be on video. Other people don't, right? The other thing, I like what you mentioned, Sherry, about if I turn on video, I can't understand anyone. That's an important thing to know about your team. If there is someone with that, it's also important to realize that there are people who are hard of hearing and you may not know it. And so video allows them to match the lip movement and to be able to read lips partially. And so I would just make sure that you're offering a variety of ways to connect for everyone, you know, irrespective of what their primary preference might be typically. And I have here from Kim, I think you can ask or request video, requiring it only occasionally could work. Since updating my laptop software, oh, okay. 2 days ago, my browsers won't allow Zoom access to my microphone even after I give permission. Ooh, that's challenging too. Maybe try a peripheral microphone, that might work.
I'm wondering, when you talk about limitations, such as the microphone or stuff like that, now, what responsibility is, let's move away from the COVID for a moment, and someone wants to work from home. Now, where does the responsibility now lie to the company and to the individual? Say, hey, this is now our norm, or if you've chosen to do this, we have to bring the speed of technology up so this system will work and be effective for you and I.
Yeah.
I can understand now in the COVID right now where we have the limitations, but if we go forward and saying we're going to be working from home, using a limitation of technology, I think can limit the effectiveness.
Sure. I would, I'm not an HR specialist, but I would imagine that that's a company policy issue, right? If I agree to allow people to work from home, then I would expect that as a company, I would have it in my policy that either I'm supporting them technologically, I'm giving them the tools and technology to be successful in that, or I'm making it explicitly clear that I'm not. And that here's my expectation. My expectation is you'll still be able to engage as if you were in the office. That would require X, Y, and Z. Can you commit to that? So I think from my perspective, it would be all about setting really crystal clear expectations and then managing to them. However that happens, whether it's I'm supplying it or they're supplying it. Does that help? All right, so in your participant guides or your notebook that you're taking notes, just make a commitment to yourself of one thing that you're willing to do to be more attentive toward your virtual team members. Just one, just something that you'll try. All right, and rather than typing on screen for this one, let's just discuss it. What does leading with purpose mean to you? What we're going to talk about now is just this leading with intention. And what does that mean? So in a virtual environment, it's even more important to lead with intention, but what does that mean if I'm leading with purpose or with intention?
Having a consistent message.
Absolutely. What else?
Very specific direction.
Giving them specific direction?
Mm-hmm.
I think ensuring that everyone has the same information. If you're doing one-on-ones instead of a mass meeting, that everyone's getting the same message and the same deadlines and the same instructions.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is a critical component of it, is to make sure that there's this alignment of communication, right? Planning ahead is another important thing. When you are leading virtually, I don't know if anybody else has had this experience, but I find that I actually have to work harder because I have to think through all of the issues, the technical issues, you know, what I'm going to look like, what they're going to look like, what are they going to be doing on screen, off screen, on the phone. Does anybody else feel that way, or is it just me? Like, it's a little harder, right? And so it requires more planning. And so I would encourage you to be purposeful in that planning as well.
Leading with enthusiasm, you know, the energy level of which you bring to the table with everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super important. And that's intentional too, right? If I may be having a terrible day, or the last thing I want to do is get on Zoom, but if I'm being an intentional leader, that doesn't matter. I need to come with the energy and enthusiasm that my team deserves. So great ad. Another important thing is to think about before you act. And what I like to call it practicing the pause. Practicing the pause is stopping and thinking for a moment before you interact virtually. And it could be before I send that instant message. It could be before I type that email, before I hop on a phone call or a video chat. But it's about setting an agenda, or at least setting myself in terms of intentionality and practicing a pause to say, what do I want this conversation to look like? How do I want it to go? How do I want to come across to them? Is it a serious conversation and I want my tone to match? And I don't want to be doing this the whole time while I'm saying something really serious, but my face isn't matching because I'm on video and I feel awkward, right? So really practicing that pause to set your intentionality is important in a virtual leadership capacity. And that leads us into being intentional in communication. So just by show of hands, how many people have witnessed trust being eroded because either someone sent a terrible email or a poorly worded instant message, or maybe, you know, something happened during a video call or conference. They weren't on mute and they said something awful or ugly. Anybody ever seen any of those bad things happen? Lots of hands, right? So we really want to be intentional in our communication as well. And a couple of ways we can do that. The first step is determine whatever our goal or our purpose is for the communication. Second, decide on the right channel for the communication. I gave it a shot at creating this chart of the right communication channel. It's open to debate, because you could say, for example, problem solving with one or more people could also be done by a group site like OneDrive or a Microsoft Teams. You could put a problem on there and have people all, or even Slack, you know, post their responses. But by and large, directionally, I think these are representative of some channels that make sense. So for example, if it's urgent, I'm not going to send an email, right? Because someone may be away from email, but I will pick up the phone, maybe even launch a video conference if it's really easy to do within your organization. Any questions or challenges on this chart? Anything you might go, no, that's totally wrong? Okay. The second factor in order to alleviate those three burdens is to foster community. And so what are your thoughts about when people feel isolated? What's the impact if a team member feels isolated? Either chat or come off of mute to share.
I think you mentioned this earlier. It's just checking in. Yeah.
Checking in is absolutely a strategy to preventing that isolation from occurring. But what happens if what if someone is feeling isolated? What could happen on a team?
They don't feel part of the team. Their input is not valid.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you start to see that disengagement kind of spread. You might start seeing it in some of your survey results, you know, your employee engagement, people feel ignored, things like that. All right. It's a stretch break. So Go ahead.
Take it.
Give us your best stretch. Roll your neck. Do whatever you got to do. You've been sitting here a while. A lot of slides. And I've been making you answer. Okay. So factor 2 in response to our 3 barriers is to foster community. And we've got a lot of different ways we can do this. There's lots of ideas. The first is to build trust. The second is really provide support, and that includes technology. If you're not up to speed on the technology that your team's using, get up to speed, at least enough that you can point them in the right direction to get help when they need it. I would encourage you to spend time connecting, and we're going to talk about ways you can do that virtually here in just a minute. And then find ways to celebrate success. There's different ways, really pretty inventive ways that people are doing that right now in a virtual setting. There's another list here. I won't go through these individually, but ways that we can build trust is definitely to remove barriers for people. We do that when we say, hey, you know, I don't know the answer to that, but let me go track it down or help you find an answer. Have a high say-do ratio. If you say you're going to be online at a certain time, be online at a certain time. Or if you say that you're always, you know, responsive, then make sure that you are. And then appreciate and respond to people's individual differences. We already talked a bit about that. Okay, so go ahead and put a check mark on the screen. What tools do your team members use right now? And if it's something else, there's an option for that up in the upper right-hand corner. What ways do people stay in connection or share documents or connect virtually right now? Your check mark is on that little screen. It's on the stamp of your toolbar. I'm seeing Outlook, Microsoft Teams, GoToMeeting, Dropbox. This is WhatsApp down here in the lower right-hand corner. We've got Clubhouse as a new app that's just come out. If you'd rather come off mute, you're welcome to do so as well. All right, GoToMeeting, couple of teams there.
Yeah, this is Kathy. We use for Lifespan Respite Care Coalition right now for our board members. We're using the Facebook.
Oh, awesome. So you just created a Facebook group?
Yeah.
Great way to do that. I have had teams in the past where we did that because you can share documents through there. You can message.
Yeah, it's really nice when you can share documents, and we're following a legislative session right now too. So we can, you know, if we find something, we can always share that.
Yeah, that's great. And I like that most people, you know, have Facebook on their phone too. So it's right in the palm of their hand. They have it with them all the time. That's great. Marco Polo is a fun one too. Let me show you what it looks like. It looks like this, and you just record a quick little video, and then people engage with it asynchronously. I cannot say that word. Anyway, they engage with it when on their own time, whenever they feel like it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That one's a fun one as well. Lots of Teams, lots of Zoom. All right, WebEx. Fantastic. Let me clear these.
I'm still trying to figure out how you did the check mark.
Oh, I'm going to go on to the next slide just in the interest of time, but if you find it, feel free to check mark on the screen. We'll allow you.
I see it in reactions, but I didn't see how to make it work. Okay, thank you.
You see the little toolbar?
Yeah, reaction.
Okay. And then stamp. Like I could put a little heart here?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Feel free to do it on the screen if you want. Nobody's going to mind, will you? Nobody will mind, will you? Yeah. You're good.
All right, go ahead.
One tip is don't make people feel guilty. We talked about this earlier, if they can't go on video. So we want you to be a good example as a leader and use video when and where possible. What I often will do is I'll go on video with my hair in a ponytail, no makeup, and looking pretty grungy. Because what that allows is my team to feel comfortable that if they're having a day where they need to do that, then they can do that. So show up, be vulnerable, be an example, and just show up human, right?
Right.
Okay. Best practices of staying connected. So now it's time for you guys to share some of yours. What are some ways that you all stay connected with your virtual team members right now? What's helping?
If not daily, weekly check-ins.
Okay. So like stand up, almost like a scrum meeting, daily or weekly check-ins.
Mm-hmm. It could be either, a quick phone call, text message.
Team chats often, team lunches I'm seeing, meetings, Zoom. Excellent.
Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, remembering to ask about what's going on in their personal lives. Sometimes I think in this virtual space, we forget to have that camaraderie and office speak because we're not walking past each other's desks anymore. So
it's so true. How many of you, you just launch right into a meeting, right? Everything's just launch right in. There's none of that kind of just everyday banter. Great point. Yeah. Excellent. Anything else? Any ways that you're staying connected?
So NCET has a monthly board meeting, and we have some similar to what we did with this, where we have a half hour of networking. We have a half hour of networking before the board meeting. So it's not just a question of logging on and jumping right into it. We give people a half hour to catch up on what's going on personally.
Excellent. Yeah.
We usually do about between 5 and 10 minutes because everybody's on a crunch time getting, we have our Zoom meetings sometimes as early as 7:30 in the morning. But we catch up to everybody, and then they can go on and go back and to their work and stuff. So
I love it. I've put some additional ideas on screen. So think of these in a virtual way. You could physically send a thank you note to someone's home address. That's totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
If they're in the same city, you can take them a meal and drop it off on their front porch, or you could send them a meal through Uber Eats, anywhere in the world. Ask someone to coffee, ask them to a glass of iced tea and have a virtual iced tea. I've seen people do mocktail hours, bring your kid to virtual work where they come and they sit behind them or they run the show. Lots of really some interesting ways that people are continuing to connect. What do you do to celebrate success with your virtual teams? Anybody found a neat way to celebrate? Like the end of a project? Gift cards? Okay. Awesome. What about like new births or end of a project or I don't know, any number of reasons we might celebrate?
We've had some virtual opportunities to celebrate weddings recently, a couple of those. And so at any given point, we may have one person send out a party in a box kind of idea.
Oh, yeah, those are fun. So, we did that for Caregivers Coalition with all the people that put the Caregivers Coalition summit on. Well, it wasn't a summit. It was the caregivers recognition, and that's what we did. We put everything in a box, and the box was sent out beforehand, and everybody was able to open their box and see what they got. So it was nice that way.
It's a lot of fun.
I love that. I've done that with participants. So because it got kind of canceled at the last minute, everything that they would have received if they were in an in-person session, I sent them a little box with all the little tchotchkes and different things. So it piqued their interest. They opened the box and they're like, what is all this stuff? And it had little, things like, don't open yet, or I'll tell you what this is later. And so it kind of built that excitement. Here's a couple of other ideas for celebrating success with your virtual team. There's a whole list of volunteer opportunities you can do virtually. I would encourage you to Google that. It's pretty neat when you can share in that common type of experience. Since we don't have a ton of different time zones, I'm going to go ahead and skip this and just give you the best practices. One of the best practices I have is just to use a global meeting planner application. So you select the cities that everybody's in and it tells you the best time to meet. It's really important in that respect to make sure your calendars are up to date and plan really well. I have unfortunately had people join my meetings on Sundays their time because they didn't they thought it was like a mandatory meeting and it was just, I made a mistake. So the other thing I would encourage you to do is to be precise about time. So if you're going to, for example, say, this is due by end of day, is that my day, your day, his time zone, the other person's time zone? Be really clear about when that time is. So be really precise. And then make sure you're recording or documenting it in some way for those that weren't able to attend.
I had a friend who liked to work late at night, and his idea of end of day was midnight.
That's mine.
Right.
Oh.
That's mine too. Yeah. So I used to always ask my boss, I'm like, so that's mine? And she's like, yes, it's midnight, Kerri, So, but I like to be clear about that, because what happens is then you have all these missed expectations and people are ticked off and you're like, yeah, but you didn't say, my daughter's in college. She definitely turns in her papers very last minute, till midnight. So important to distinguish the difference. All right, our third and final factor to consider in overcoming these challenges is coaching and developing. And so your job is to facilitate that network, assisting with career development, and really encouraging self-reliance. I mentioned this before, but there's a big difference between activity and output. And great virtual leaders have learned to focus on the work output versus the activity. And so what are some of the challenges, or what are some of the strategies you found to being able to do that in a virtual environment? How do you focus on outcomes? I'll share one of the ways I do it, and that is we use a share drive. So it's pretty clear when something's completed. And so I can just go in and see, oh, yep, great, done. I don't have to then follow up, text, email, that sort of thing. Any other ideas before we move forward? All right. A couple of missteps to avoid. Constant monitoring or evaluating the behaviors, the how they're getting it done versus the what, micromanaging or delegating too much. Just because you're in a virtual environment doesn't mean you get to just delegate it all, right? It's still important to facilitate networking. I would say that it's even easier for people to network virtually because there's this the veil has been lifted, right? I should now have access to everybody in my company because everybody's on the same level playing field. Everyone's working from home, by and large. And so it's still our jobs to facilitate the introductions for people to be able to build their career. And so if you have access to the check marks, what ones are you currently doing to help develop your team? They include giving them a stretch assignment, assigning people to cross-functional projects, facilitating networking, inviting them to sit in on a call. Maybe they lead it using Zoom or WebEx. They might host virtual brainstorming sessions. What types of things are you using now? All right, the online portal. Great. Inviting them to sit in on meetings. It's a lot easier, right? Because now you don't have to fly them there or have them drive across town. They just dial in. Assigning people to cross-functional projects. Excellent. Networking, a couple of those. Brainstorming sessions. There's some neat applications that exist out there for online brainstorming. Excellent. All right, so lots of good work going on there. My advice is, if you're not having career development conversations with people on your team in a virtual environment, someone else is. So don't risk losing great talent just because you've taken your hands off the wheel, given that we've moved to working from home. It's still important. We still need to check in with them to see how they're doing and where we can assist. All right, so what's one thing you're going to do to improve your effectiveness as a virtual leader? So just where we've been, we talked about 3 barriers to avoid or overcome in terms of virtual leadership: staying focused and motivated, a sense of isolation, and a feeling of stagnation. And we talked about, 3 of those, which is be attentive, foster community, and coach and develop. What questions can I ask or answer? COVID brain.
So Kerri, where's the participant handbook that you mentioned in the chat?
It was the very first chat. Let me see if I can.
Does everybody else see it? Maybe it's just me.
Oh, that's weird. Hold on. It was there in the beginning, wasn't it? Folks that were on the call early on.
We'll blame Dave.
I like it. Let's see. I believe that's it. Oh, that went directly to Lynn.
Here it is. Okay.
There it is.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you.
All right.
So, Kerri, I have a question.
Yes.
So how would you go about helping someone on your team who is unmotivated, disengaged, and just having a really hard time? I mean, not to get too personal, but I think because there might be some, mental health issues through this COVID space.
How do you know
suggestions on what's that?
How do you know? What are you seeing or not seeing to suggest to you that they're unmotivated?
Not meeting deadlines, not getting goals done, things that they were passionate about previously, they are not.
Okay.
Just more existing rather than doing.
Mm-hmm. I would, to find out why, I would stick to the facts, and I'd probably use something like the SBI model. So I've noticed, Karen, that over the last quarter, you have missed several deadlines that were important. So that's a situation. The behavior, when I called your attention to it, it didn't seem that it was important to you, or that's at least the feeling I was getting. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are there. Because the impact of that is that I've started to lose trust, or I'm concerned about giving you another important project, whatever that impact is. So situation, behavior, impact, and then engage them in a conversation to help uncover what it is. Because what it sounds like, it could be, to your point, it could be mental health, it could be a situation at home, maybe they're overwhelmed, they've got something happening in their home that's causing them to be distracted. There could be 1,000 different reasons for it. It could be truly they're disengaged and they want to go somewhere else. That's certainly a possibility, but you don't know that until you set up the conversation to compel that answer from them, right? Have you had conversations so far in that regard, or not yet?
We have had a couple of them.
Okay.
After the first one, it did seem to get better. And I just made sure I was doing like a lot of touchback, just a lot of just, you know, kind of on the sidelines, like not in front of the other team members, but just, you know, hey, can I help you with this project? Or, hey, how's it going? Or, you know, how's your day been? And hey, do you want me to send you a pizza today? Like, you know, just different little things. But it seems now that it's worse and I just can't break that barrier.
And
so
could it be a technology issue, like not knowing how to use the technology to be able to accomplish the goals, or is it the same technology as it was in person?
It's the same.
Okay.
So yeah, it's getting a little tougher to navigate just because I think, you know, I think a lot of people handle this COVID space, this working remotely and all of that differently. And so, I mean, everybody's normal is different, right? So, I mean, my normal is not your normal. It's not her normal. And so it's just, it's a new navigating through all of the stuff, I guess.
Yeah, one of the things that I've used in the past too is kind of these 3 questions I ask. Are they, do they have the skill? Do they have the will? And are they allowed to do the job, right? So do they have the will to do the job? It sounds like the answer is no. Do they have the skill? If it's a skill issue, you can train. If they're allowed, meaning do they have, you know, the access, the process, is everything in place for them to be able to access the workflow and do the work? But if it's a will issue, that's a difficult and challenging conversation, because you either get to the heart of the will, but it's not on you to fix. That's on the individual. And that's a whole nother class, really.
Thank you.
You bet. But I do think they get magnified in a virtual setting, those situations.
I know I think about this from rose-colored glasses because my industry is promotional items, but I see businesses all across the country who are interacting with sending them people, you know, team shirts for the day and wear them on a Friday that you meet, and meetings in a box and little treats in the home. Or if it's a social virtual meeting, they'll send the stuff out for the virtual meeting and they'll send out the stuff for the lunch and have Grubhub deliver the lunch, but they got all the tools to eat the lunch. And so making them feel part of the team because they're paying attention to them, but also giving them the tools to be able to enjoy working at home or feeling part of the office, even though they are distant away. And
yeah, I think those things are important. The reason I purposely didn't include those, I'll tell you, is because motivation doesn't come from those, right? Those are intrinsic, you know, those are fun things that of course people love free meals, and of course people love tchotchkes and all of that kind of thing, but they're not going to stay at a job because of those. And they're not going to say, I have a great leader because I get those types of things. But you're absolutely right. There's some people doing some really inventive and neat kind of ways to show their appreciation. But if you build your foundation of virtual leadership on that, it's going to be impossible to one up each time you have done something in the past.
And I agree with that. I'm not arguing with that point. What I usually say to my customers is that if you've got a particular message or things that you're doing, this is a way to reinforce that message so that you're being clear and everyone knows what page you're on. But no one's going to stay because they got a T-shirt. Give me a break.
Well, I sure appreciate all of you and your interaction. Thank you so much. I think I went over now with my questions and answers on Dave's. Sorry about that.
No problem at all. Clearly people are sticking around to hear it. So thank you so much for being here today. This was great information. And I think literally this is the first time in the year that I've heard anyone talk about this subject. So thank you so much for doing this.
You bet. My pleasure.
Yeah.